to Crime in Court. My name is Heather, and this is, I cannot believe it's episode 38 of the Canton Cover-Up Commonwealth versus Karen Reed. This is, of course, regarding the Boston police officer, John O'Keefe, whose life was taken from him on January 29th, 2022. And, I've covered I've covered this case, and we've gone through all of the court records, documents, police reports, things like that. And now we're going through some people's testimony, and this actually, somebody recommended revisiting the Lopilato brothers. So I'm going to bring that to you. Today, we're going to read through some court documents, and we're also going to watch some testimony of Sergeant Lank. So before I explain all that, I was going to show you here on the thumbnail, we've got on your far left bottom corner, that is Chris Albert, and he's the smaller image. The larger image, the one who you see in a suit and tie, is Sergeant Lank, and we are going to dive into his testimony. So, why is Sergeant Lank important, first of all? Well, Sergeant Lank is close friends with Chris Albert. That's why I put them both on the cover. They they kind of deny having a relationship now, but they said that they used to be really close. But I don't think that I think they're trying to distance themselves because of the close relationships that have been found in this case because Sergeant Michael Lank has been found to be a close friend of Chris Albert's, and Trooper Trooper Proctor, who was the lead investigator from the Massachusetts State Police, also has close ties with the Albert family. Lank is Canton PD sergeant of the Canton PD, and he, like I said, has close ties to the Alberts as well. Kevin Albert, he is also Canton PD, so he would know Kevin through his work. He knows Chris because of growing up. All these people grew up together. It's a very incestuous story, and Karen is the outsider. And I love that her defense team has really brought that up because it's true. I mean, everybody here has this tight little circle of trust, the circle of trust. Um, from Meet the Family, all these people, obviously, the McAlberts, the McCabe's, the Alberts, Higgins, they all have this really close connection, and they are all, I think, lying for one another. At least that is what the testimony so far has really appeared to be in that regard. But anyways, let's talk about Michael Lank. And like I said, he is important because the ties that he has with the family. And I want to mention also because Chris Albert and Julie Albert, the parents of Colin Albert, they both testified in court that they did not go to 34 Fairview that night. But there are some discrepancies in this belief because somewhere I know there's been police reports or somebody's reports have said talked about Chris and Julie being at the house. So we still don't know for sure if they were or weren't. They testified that they weren't and that they went home right after the bar. And I believe they did that so that they could be Colin's alibi because I don't think Colin got home the times that they're saying because their timeline got totally messed up on the stand anyways by some good cross-examination. We found that, Chris Albert and Julie Albert might not be telling the whole truth about that night and how they got home and when Colin Albert got home. So, regarding Michael Lank, he has been with the Canton PD for 25 years. He also was recently, in the last 2 years, he was promoted. So this August will be 2 years. He will have been sergeant. And keep that in mind because as we're going to talk about the Lopilato brothers, who are interestingly, they are some individuals who are on the defense witness list. It'd be very interesting if they get called. I would love to hear from them because they can completely discredit Michael Lank. Michael Lank and the Lopilato brothers had an incident in, I think it was 2002. The document tells us we're gonna listen to a little bit of his testimony, and then we're gonna read through the charging complaint from the Lopilato brothers. They were the plaintiffs, and they were suing multiple officers, including Michael Lank. So we're gonna get into that, but first, let's watch his testimony because there are some important things that come up regarding the investigation. And so I'm gonna play this first clip, and on this channel, I like to call all my clips or give them all a title just to kind of let me know what it's all about and kind of be funny and cheeky in some ways. So this clip I'm calling Just Inside the Door. So here we go.
Now, as far as following your conversation with Ms. McCabe, what was sort of the next steps that you took on?
After I spoke to Ms. McCabe, I advised her that we were going to need to speak with the homeowners. She said that they were probably sleeping. I advised her that we were going to need to speak with them, and that's when I placed the call to the CPAC unit.
And prior to that, when you were on scene, had you seen anyone come in or go out of the residence at 34 Fairview Road?
No.
And as far as sort of the other houses on the street, what, if any, activity did you observe with reference to any residents of those homes coming in or going out of their homes?
I did not observe anybody come in or out of their home.
Following your initial call to CPAC in conversation with Mr. Proctor, what is it that you did next?
Once that call was complete, Sergeant Good and I observed that there was now a light on in the house of 34 Fairview, and we made the decision to then go in and speak with the homeowners.
And how was it that you sort of proceeded up to the home?
They waited for the homeowners to wake up. Like, there's a person unconscious on your lawn. Go wake them up. Don't wait for them to wake up.
I believe, I don't recall if we used I believe we used the driveway, but I'm not 100% sure.
And you came into the home, recall which door that you used to enter the home?
The main door, the front door.
When you entered in through the main door, what, if you could describe to the jury sort of what you observed as far as what was before you from a layout perspective?
There was a staircase right in front of us, and to the right, it entered into like what appeared to be like a dining area.
And who, if anyone, did you speak with inside the home that morning?
Brian Albert and Nicole Albert.
And what, if any, relationship to the home did you determine based on your conversation with them?
They were the homeowners.
Now, Brian Albert, is that someone that you knew prior to January 29, 2022?
Yes.
And how did you know?
I knew him as the oldest of the Albert brothers.
So he admits he knows him, but let's see what he says about their existing relationship.
And did you know some of the other Albert brothers?
Yes.
And let me ask you this, Sergeant. Where did you grow up?
Canton.
And how long have you lived in Canton?
We moved here. We moved to Canton when I was 5 years old.
So
His whole life.
essentially, since you were 5 years old, you live in the town, correct?
Yes.
Okay, you work in the town, correct?
Yes.
Do you have children?
I do.
Any of them play sports?
They do.
Objection.
Cheers.
I'm sustained.
Move to strike.
Strike that.
What, if any, other sort of, other than living and working in the town, what, if anything else, is it that you do around the town?
I coach youth sports.
And how long have you done that for?
This is just some kind of emotional, they're trying to pull at the heartstrings of the juror saying, oh, look, he's this great guy. He coaches and he's got kids and his kids play sports and all this stuff. And that's what they're trying to get into to like make him to show he's got this good character. But if he is a good cop and he doesn't make the mistakes that these allegations through this investigation from the defense, if he's not making mistakes in his investigation, then he shouldn't be, scrutinized too badly. But we need to take a look.
I would say at least 9 or 10 years.
And how would you describe your relationship with Brian Albert prior to that January 29, 2022?
Civil?
The two of you friends? Do you socialize?
No.
Now, in addition to Brian Albert and Nicole Albert, who, if anyone else, where did you speak to them within the home?
Just inside the door by the staircase.
And
Just inside
how would you
the
describe
door. He, remember this, because he testifies he did not go past the foyer, past the front entrance area. He never made it beyond a small little entryway in the home. And others testified to him coming in all the way to the house and them sitting at the dining room table and things like that. And that's not true, according to Sergeant Lank. So there's a lot of discrepancies in testimony here that I just wanted to point out.
their demeanor when you were speaking to them?
They appeared, especially Mr. Albert, appeared disheveled, looked like he had just woken up.
And about how long a conversation was it between Brian Albert and Nicole Albert that initial time?
I'd say 15, 20 minutes.
And beyond that, who, if anyone else, did you see within the home besides yourself, Sergeant Goods, and Mr. and Mrs. Albert?
Jennifer McCabe?
No one else at that time?
No.
Are you familiar with a gentleman named Brian Hayes?
I am.
And how are you familiar with him?
I met Brian when he was stationed at our police station. I don't know how many years ago it was, but he was assigned to our building years ago. That's how I met him.
And assigned in what capacity? What I mean by that, what did you do for work?
Brian is a ATF agent.
And did you see Mr. Higgins at any point in time during the time that you were at Fairview Road that morning?
Not on my initial response.
So sometime after, is that correct?
Yes.
And when about was that?
That would have been shortly after 9 a.m.
And we'll get to that in a moment, but after your conversation with Brian Albert and Nicole Albert inside the house, what is it that you did then?
Could you repeat that, please?
After talking to the homeowners, what was your next step on scene that day? What did you do next?
After speaking with the family, came out. By that point, Lieutenant Gallagher was on scene.
All right, that's enough of that scene. I just wanted to show you who was around when he arrived on the scene. He arrived after John was already in the ambulance, so he never even saw John. I believe he arrived while the ambulance might have still been on scene, might not have driven away yet, but when he arrived, John was, I think he was gone, but he might have been in the ambulance and on scene, but he testifies he never sees John. All right, so I'm going to skip to the next scene, which I call maybe 5 minutes.
Scene, did you have any contact or interaction with a person named Karen?
I did not.
Did you see her on scene at all that day?
I don't recall seeing her. I believe she was there while I was there, but I never spoke to her.
Now, following your initial conversation inside the home of 34 Fairview with Brian Albert, Nicole Albert, and speaking to Jennifer McCabe outside, who, if anyone else, did you speak with that arrived on scene that morning?
Matthew McCabe.
And when was it that Matthew McCabe arrived in relation to your arrival and when you spoke to the other people?
Matthew McCabe arrived just a couple of minutes after I had walked out of the house the first time.
And so when he arrived, where did you go?
Moments after he arrived, I went back into the house to speak with Mr. McCabe.
And about how long a conversation was it that you were in the house when you were speaking to Mr. McCabe?
I'm not sure. I'd say maybe 5 minutes.
And over the course of that morning, about how many times did you go into the residence at 34 Fairview Road?
3.
Anyone ever tell you that you couldn't go into the home or that stopped you at the doorway or anything like that?
No.
And with reference to inside of the home, what, if any, observations did you make of sort of how it was situated, anything disheveled or anything like that?
Everything appeared in order.
Everything inside the home appeared in order, according to what was just testified to, but he never leaves the foyer.
And just if you know, what, if any, relationship does Matthew McCabe have to Jennifer?
Matthew McCabe is Jennifer McCabe's husband.
Now, turning back to what was just up on the screen in Exhibit 27.
All right, so that's good for that one. This next clip I call, what if any call did you receive? You can kind of guess where I got that from. What if any call did you receive?
Jennifer McCabe called at
Police station. Now, Lieutenant Lank, once you were back at the police station, what, if any, call did you receive from anyone in regard to what happened? Who, if anyone, called you once you were back at the stage?
Jennifer McCabe called at 9 a.m.
And where did you go following that phone call with Jennifer McCabe?
Lieutenant Gallagher and I went back to 34 Fairview Road.
So this is now the third time that you've gone back and gone inside the residence of 34 Fairview Road, is that correct?
That's correct.
And who, if anyone, did you speak with, along with yourself and Lieutenant Gallagher, once you returned there that morning?
Jennifer McCabe.
Okay, about how long a period of conversation was that second conversation that you had with Mr. McCabe?
Between 5 and 10 minutes.
And then following that, where did you go from there?
So he was called back to the scene by Jennifer McCabe. She calls him to come back because she forgot to tell him, oh, yeah, by the way, Karen was saying, did I hit him? Could I have hit him? Because that's what he added to his police report after that visit. All right, so do you know the Alberts? This is the next clip. But before I get there, he testified to part of the crime scene collection regarding the snowblower and things like that. So he talked a little bit about that and securing the scene and things along that nature. So this, like I said, this scene is called Do You Know the Alberts? I went too far. Here we go.
For which the defendant is currently on trial before you folks. You may use this evidence to the extent in their
Lieutenant Lank, I want to start by asking you about your relationship with certain members of the Albert family. Do you know any other members of the Albert family other than Brian Albert?
Yes.
Can you describe who those are?
Kevin Albert, who is a detective on our department. Chris Albert. And I know Tim Albert.
Are those three individuals brothers?
Yes.
Who is the eldest brother?
Brian.
How long have you known, I want to start first with Tim Albert. How long have you known Tim Albert?
I knew Tim Albert when he was a kid because he was friends with a younger brother of a friend of mine.
Starting at what age?
12.
So you've known
He was 12. I was probably 16 or so.
My boyfriend's vacuuming, so I don't want you to hear it. I keep muting. Um, See how long these people have known one another? So it's not so hard to imagine that they might, just might, lie for one another and protect one another. If they've known each other their whole lives, then they're like family to one another.
Okay, so the better part of your life, you've known Tim Albert.
Since about 16, I would say.
And what about Chris Albert?
Chris Albert I've known since junior high.
Which would be about what age?
13, 14.
You grew up
12,
with Chris?
12, 13. I was friendly with Chris from junior high through high school and into our 20s.
And friendly with Tim?
Friendly. They always say friendly. They don't want to admit that they are friends with. Unless this is just a Boston thing where they say I was friendly with. But all of the witnesses that are having their friendships in question, they keep saying we were friendly with that person, but they don't say I was friends with that person. Do you see the difference in how a little bit of semantics there just changes the whole dynamic? Because you could say I was friendly with that person, but like I never saw them. I only saw them on very rare occasions. I didn't know them very well. That sounds like friendly. But if you say I'm friends with that person, that's a whole different story. So they they like to play with words, this set of witnesses.
I wouldn't say I was friendly to say hello to Tim. I didn't associate with him. He was younger. It was Chris's younger brother.
But you also knew Chris's older brother, Brian?
Yes.
Back in those days.
I knew who he was.
So you've known the three of them for basically your entire life?
No, I had met them. I had met Brian. I didn't know him other than just being Chris's older brother when we were younger kids.
Certainly with regard to Chris, you would consider him a close friend.
Consider who a close friend?
Chris. I'm
Yes.
using first names only because they're all
Sure, sure. Chris and I were pretty good friends when we were younger, yes.
I want to draw your attention.
Damn it. Mute button. My arch nemesis. So I don't even know what I was going to say now. What did he say? Hold on.
Consider who a close friend?
Chris.
Mm.
I'm
Yes.
using first names only because they're all in the
Sure,
cover.
sure.
So he's denying that he's close friends with Chris now, currently, but he said he admits we were close friends, in the past, but not now. So that's another way that he can distance himself. Besides, we were just friendly. It's another way he can distance himself from the people in this case, even if he is good friends with them.
Chris and I were pretty good friends when we were younger, yes.
I want to draw your attention to an incident in August of 2002. Do you remember an incident in 2002 occurring with that involved Chris Albert?
Yes.
In 2002, in August of 2002 specifically, you were off duty, correct?
Yes.
You had been drinking alcohol, correct?
Yes.
You were approached by Chris Albert out in the parking lot. Is that right?
When we were younger, yes.
I want to draw your attention to an incident in August of 2002. Do you remember an incident in 2002 occurring with that involved Chris Albert?
Yes.
In 2002, in August of 2002 specifically, you were off duty, correct?
Yes.
You had been drinking alcohol, correct?
Yes.
You were approached by Chris Albert out in the parking lot. Is that right?
That's correct.
And Chris Albert told you some information about being in a fight. That he had been in a fight or an altercation of some sort, correct?
He told me he had been in an altercation earlier in the night and some threats had been made to him and his family.
And you got out of your car and discussed this with Mr. Albert, correct?
No.
You just talked to him while you were seated in your car?
Yes.
Okay. At some point, did some other individuals approach that same area?
Yes.
Was there a fight that you believed was about to ensue?
Yes.
Did you get out of your car at that point?
I did.
Did you come to Chris's aid by, quote unquote, activating yourself as an officer?
I got out of my car and I approached the group and I pleaded with them to not fight tonight. I said, there's not going to be a fight tonight. There's 6 of you guys. He's here with his girlfriend. There's not going to be a fight tonight.
Did you come to Chris Albert's aid as best you could as a longtime friend of his?
I came to the aid of a citizen who was in fear and in need.
That citizen happened to be Chris Albert, whom you had known since you were 12 years old.
Correct.
Yeah.
Ultimately, a fight did break out, did it not?
Yes.
And you engaged in that fight.
Yes.
And again, you had been drinking alcohol at that point, correct?
Correct.
And you were off duty in August of 2002 during this fight.
Yes.
Just like you were off duty in 2022 when you were called by Sergeant Good to activate and come to the crime scene at 34 Fairview.
When Sergeant Good contacted me, I was not working. I was due to work at 7:45 that morning. When Sergeant Good contacted me and told me what was going on, then I activated myself and came to work because I was the detective sergeant.
And that's similar sort of activation, using that word in air quotes, it's similar sort of activation that you employed back in 2002 to assist Chris Albert.
No.
You did, in fact, call for someone to call the police and get some Canton officers over there, correct?
Excuse me. So in 2002?
In 2002.
Yes.
Okay. And I failed to ask you this, but in 2002, you were, in fact, a Canton police officer.
Yes.
At the time. After the other officers arrived, did you order the other officers to handcuff or somehow restrain one of the 2 brothers that were involved in this fight, Chris?
No.
Ultimately, did you see whether or not those officers handcuffed or otherwise restrained one of the brothers that was involved in this fight?
Yes.
And did you then engage physically in a fight with the other brother who was not restrained?
No. The struggle had already occurred.
All right. So let me make sure I get the timing right. You did, in fact, engage in a physical fight with one of the brothers, correct?
Upon being struck, yes.
I'm sorry, say that again.
Upon being struck, yes.
And then you struck him back.
Yes.
You ended up on the ground.
Yes, we were wrestling, yes.
And ultimately, the other officers had to pull you off that man, correct?
No.
You ultimately, the fight was broken up between you and the other brother. Is that right?
That's correct.
All right. And that fight was broken up by the officers who were on scene.
Yes.
After this physical altercation with the brother who was not ultimately restrained, both of the brothers and everybody else was just told by the officers, just go away. Get out of here, go home, correct?
No, I believe one of the brothers left the scene, fled the scene, and the brother that was restrained was ultimately uncuffed and left free to go.
And nobody was arrested that night.
Correct.
Nobody chased down the brother that left the scene, correct?
That's correct.
And nobody arrested the brother that had been handcuffed.
Correct.
And no police reports were written by you or any of the other officers about this incident on that night.
I don't recall when the other officers wrote theirs. I did not write mine on that night.
The next day, you became
Excuse
aware that one or both of the brothers
No reports were written about this incident that night? Isn't that what cops are supposed to do? Write about it right away so that they don't forget things?
reports were written by you or any of the other officers about this incident on that night.
I don't recall when the other officers wrote theirs. I did not write mine on that night.
The next day, you became aware that one or both of the brothers had arrived at Canton Police Department to file a formal complaint for having been physically attacked by you and some of the other officers involved, correct?
I don't recall when I was made aware that they had come down to the police station.
You are aware that there was a complaint sought against you for the physical attack that was alleged to have occurred, correct?
It was brought to my attention that they had come down to the police station.
And you also are aware that only after that complaint had been sought, the police reports were then dated and filed against the two brothers, correct?
So I had spoken to the sergeant on duty the night of the
Yes or no
incident.
question. I'm just looking at the time.
It's not a yes or no question.
So he was just asking you about dates. So can you answer the question? Ask the question
Could you
about the
repeat?
dates again, please.
I'm seeking the chronology of events. A fight occurs, a complaint against you occurs, and then police reports are filed against the two people that are complaining against you. Is that the chronology?
Yes.
And you're also aware that although he had been in a physical fight that night, no charges were ever brought against Chris Albert, correct?
Objection, Your Honor.
Do you know that?
I don't know. I don't even know where the fight occurred.
Officer Lank, what we just talked about, is that an example of you using your position as a police officer to come to the aid of one of the members of the Albert family?
It was me coming to the aid of a citizen who was terrified and scared for him and his family on that night.
Who happened to
Who
be
happened?
named what?
Excuse me. Who happened to be Chris Albert.
You mentioned
Well, that's interesting. He almost risked his badge for Chris Albert when he was a young cop, newly probably into his position, few years in, he says he's been a cop for 25 plus years, and this incident took place about 22 years ago, so he wasn't a cop for very long, and he used his position of power to get vindication for the Albert family. Think about that. He's been doing that since how long now? He did it in 2020 or 2002, and now there's another uh, crime that occurred, this time a homicide, and he still is immersed in the Albert and in the Albert family and in the crime itself, in the investigation of the crime, which he shouldn't even be because of his ties to the Albert family. So it's um, pretty strange that he would be the lead investigator for. Sorry, I'm trying to do two things at once and I can never do that. It's pretty strange that he would be the lead investigator for a family friend.
Kevin Albert. Who is he?
Kevin Albert is a detective with the Canton Police.
Is he a coworker?
Yes.
How long have you known him?
Probably since 14, 15 years old.
And you also consider him to be a friend as well as a coworker
I do.
and a colleague.
Yes.
And you're also well aware. I mean, you've said it already. He's the little brother of Brian Albert.
Correct.
And you're also aware that the reason that your department was ultimately recused from this investigation, Lieutenant Lank, is because of a perceived bias or conflict of interest between the Albert family and the Canton Police Department, correct?
Yes, there was a perceived bias.
But there was this perceived bias, but he never really took himself completely out of the investigation. Canton was supposed to recuse after the Massachusetts State Police took over, but yet they bring Karen's car to the Canton Sally Port, and all of the Canton police officers that we know have these ties to the Alberts are in and out of that Sally Port and passing it constantly, throughout the day that day, apparently, because it was just a pass through, according to Higgins. All right, um, that's the end of that clip. So, as you can see, there was an altercation. He's telling us, he's downplaying his role in it, saying that he got attacked first, is what his story is. And he probably has to say that to, save face for himself because he's still a cop, remember. He got into an altercation with civilians out of nowhere to fight for Chris Albert, and he's still a cop. which doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. And not just a cop, but he has been promoted to sergeant. He's been promoted a couple times. And keep that in mind. We'll come back to
It was
that.
a crazy scene.
Chaotic scene?
Possibly. I don't recall my exact
This scene I'm going to call um, have you ever been lied to?
words, something to that effect.
But you do recall your exact words to dispatch being, I don't know if he's been in a fight or whatever.
Correct.
Okay. I want to talk about.
Yeah, so he said something to dispatch early on that John looked like he got into a fight, which is very telling because that's what the injuries looked like to most people, but then the Commonwealth is trying to gaslight an entire world that it was done by a car, his injuries. Anyways.
Inside the house for just a few minutes, if I could. You've talked extensively about the crime scene outside, and we'll get to that in a second, but I want to talk about what did or did not happen inside the house. Did you actually make it inside the house at some point?
Yes.
Okay. When was that? How long? Let's use Jennifer McCabe as the time frame. How long after that did you finally go inside the house, after she'd been in the house?
So it was specifically just after I got off the phone with CPAC.
So just a few minutes after we ended that video?
Yes.
And you walked you said either along the driveway or through the yard?
I believe it was up the driveway.
Okay. Once you went in the house, you made contact with the individuals in the house, correct?
Yes.
And you believed, at least at that point, that there was a potential, that there was a, let me rephrase that. You knew that you were dealing with a violent incident, correct?
No.
You thought maybe it was just a heart attack?
I didn't know what it was. At that point in time, I didn't know what it was. Could have been a multitude of things.
But what was going through your mind at that point was it could have been a fight or whatever, because he had trauma to his head. Those were your words, right?
Those were my words, yes.
Okay. So you didn't think it was like some old man who died of old age, right?
Based on his age, no, I wouldn't have suspected that.
You didn't think it was an accidental drowning or something?
Again, it could have been a multitude of things to cause those injuries. So at that point in time, we had no idea what we were looking at.
But you were aware that it had something to do with a violent incident. He had trauma to his face and he's unconscious, correct?
Objection, Your Honor.
Sustained.
Why is this sustained?
Did you believe that there were any indicators?
Why is that sustained? We should know the injuries by now, but Lolly still has yet to bring in the medical examiner or anybody to tell us that a crime actually even occurred. Because at this point, I don't believe that Karen necessarily was drunk and could have done an OUI or whatever. That's like their DUI in Massachusetts. And I forgot what else I was going to say. But yeah, so blah, 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 blah. I don't know. My mind just went blank. This happens to me all the time. I'm sorry. I apologize.
That Mr. O'Keefe had been involved in some sort of a physical altercation.
Possibly.
Okay. And that's because you used the phrase, he had trauma to his face and head, right?
That's what I had been told, yes.
So based on what you had been told, you knew that there was a person laying out unconscious just outside a residence that may have been involved in a physical altercation. That's fair.
It's a possibility, yes. Again, there were a multitude of things that were going through my head as possibilities.
But that's one of the premier possibilities, right?
I wouldn't say it's premier. It was one of the possibilities.
And it's logical to believe that if a fight had occurred, very well may have started inside the residence 30 feet away.
Objection, Your Honor.
Sustained.
Did you believe, in your mind, that it was possible, given the fact that a violent confrontation was possible in your mind, that it could have started inside the house?
Objection.
Sustained.
May we approach?
Yes.
I'm going to skip through the sidebar.
Believed at the time and the possibility.
Sure. Sure.
Lieutenant Lank, given what you believed at the time and the possibility that there was a fight or whatever, did you logically think, in your mind, your state of mind was, it possibly could have started in the house?
If it had been a confrontation, it could have started anywhere.
Right? The house is part of anywhere, right?
Correct.
So, in other words, the house is not excluded in your mind at that point as a starting point for the investigation. Is that right?
The starting point would have been where Mr. O'Keefe had been discovered, and then based on speaking with the witnesses, there was no indication that he had ever made it into the house.
Well, you didn't know that until you followed up on your investigation, correct?
I learned that by speaking to Ms. McCabe.
So you just took Ms. McCabe's word for it?
At that point in time, that was the only person I had spoken to. And
So you took her word for it. That's exactly what he just said. Whatever McCabe says, you just believed.
on speaking with the witnesses, there was no indication that he had ever made it into the house.
Well, you didn't know that until you followed up on your investigation, correct?
I learned that by speaking to Ms. McCabe.
So you just took Ms. McCabe's word for it?
At that point in time, that was the only person I had spoken to, and she gave me a timeline of events from that night where Mr. O'Keefe was supposed to come back to the house, but never made it.
Have you ever been in your course of investigating cases, have you ever been lied to by a witness?
Objection, Your Honor.
Can you answer that? Have you ever been lied to by a witness?
Yes.
So it's not necessarily the best investigative technique to just take a witness's word for something, correct?
Objection.
That's sustained.
You need to actually investigate the circumstances for yourself and to your own satisfaction. Is that a fair statement?
Sure.
One of those investigative techniques would be to walk into the house and figure out who's who there, correct?
Can you rephrase the question?
Sure. One of those investigative techniques to satisfy yourself that you're actually getting to the truth of the matter would be to walk into the house and figure out who's in the house first.
I will agree that I needed to speak to the people in the home. I can't just walk in their house. I have to announce myself, and they don't have to let me in.
I understand. I'm not trying to parse those words. I just mean entering the home and interviewing witnesses. That would be a normal part of your investigation initially, correct?
Yes.
And you also knew that the most obvious place to look for witnesses that may have information about a fallen man in the snow would be 30 feet away in the home, correct?
Correct.
So once you're inside the residence, you walked in the front door, correct?
Yes.
You indicated that there's a stair that serves as the second floor. Is that right?
Straight ahead, yes.
Right. Just before the staircase, there's a door to your left, right?
I don't recall.
You remember whether or not there's a door that when you open it, goes directly downstairs to the basement.
I don't recall.
You indicated on direct examination that you didn't notice anything. I'm paraphrasing, so forgive me. You didn't notice anything out of place in the home.
No.
But you didn't go downstairs to the basement and look, did you?
No.
You didn't look for broken furniture down there.
I didn't enter the basement at all.
You didn't look for torn clothing down there.
Objection, Your Honor.
Sustained.
How about anywhere in the house? Did you look for broken furniture or torn clothing? Or...
And this is the problem. No one investigated the home. And if they had gone in, they might have seen some signs of a potential crime scene, but they didn't look. And that's the problem.
Blood evidence or DNA evidence?
At that point in time, I never made it past the front foyer area.
So the answer to my question is no, you did not.
I never made it past the front foyer area.
So if I were to ask you one more time, I know you never made it past the foyer. Did you ever investigate the foyer area or any other part of the house for evidence of a fight?
The only area I was able to observe at that point, everything appeared to be in order.
But you didn't search the rest of the house for a fight. Lieutenant, that's all I'm asking.
No, I wouldn't have had probable cause to do so.
And did you seek guidance from a court as to whether or not you might have probable cause?
You mean a search warrant?
That's what I mean.
I wouldn't fill out an affidavit for a search warrant because it wouldn't have probable cause.
In your mind, there was no...
He didn't think that there was probable cause, so he didn't ask for a warrant. I mean, he didn't write a probable affidavit so that he could get a warrant, which, again, is a problem. They did not investigate like they should have investigated this as a crime. Especially, I think well, obviously we know it's because of Brian Albert and his influence, and this family is like a cult, I swear, or the mob. They have a lot of power in this town, apparently. People are afraid of them. People know that these individuals, this group of people, aren't on the up and up, but they're scared of them, and no one wants to speak out about these people.
PC to search that house, right?
Objection.
Let's move on from this.
Well, that's where I was ending anyway. So, all right. So that's going to end it for our clips. Gives you a little bit of an idea of how he investigated. I also wanted to point out that he never went in the house to investigate. He never made it past the foyer. He just didn't go beyond the entryway. Whether that was by choice, maybe the people, everybody, well, I thought there was a part where he even talked about like he couldn't get a good look about anything because everyone was standing around and like blocking off the stairs and whatnot. So, like blocking him off from even going into the house. Maybe he just trusted these people too much and didn't think that they could have done something. It shows negligence, at least on one hand, and it also just shows, it just goes to show that this investigation never was fully launched like an investigation. All right, so next I'm going to swap screens here, and we are going to read through, as I promised, the the court documents, this is the criminal complaint against Officer Michael Lank, Officer Glenn Nix, Officer Errol Lane, Canton Police Chief Peter Bright, and the town of Canton. Those are all the defendants. The plaintiffs are Mark and Alfredo Lopilato. All right, so introduction. This is an action for money damages on behalf of plaintiffs Mark and Alfredo Lopilato, arising out of the violation of their constitutional rights by Officer Michael Lank, Officer Glenn Nix, Officer Errol Lane, and Chief Peter Bright of the Canton Police Department. Plaintiffs also allege that the town of Canton had a custom of and policy of deliberate indifference to the rights of its citizens, which resulted in the violation of plaintiffs' constitutional rights. This action is brought pursuant to 42 U.S.C. 1983 and MGL C1211. All right. Jurisdiction is based upon 28 U.S.C. 1331 and 1343 and on the pendent jurisdiction of this court to entertain related claims arising under state law. Parties. Plaintiff Mark Lopilato is a resident of Norfolk County, Massachusetts. Plaintiff Alfredo Lopilato is a resident of Norfolk County, Massachusetts. Defendant Town of Canton is a municipality duly organized under the laws of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. The defendant, Chief of Police Peter Bright, was at all times relevant to this complaint Chief of the Canton Police Department, acting under color of law, and is sued in his supervisory capacity as police chief. At all times material hereto, it was the responsibility of Defendant Bright to properly train, supervise, and discipline police officers at the Canton Police Department and to implement established law, policies, and regulations at the Canton Police Department. Defendant Michael Lank was at all times relative to this complaint an employee of the Town of Canton Police Department and is sued in his individual capacity. Defendant Errol Lane was at all times relative to this complaint. Same thing, blah blah blah. Same thing for Glenn Nix. They are both being sued. All three of them are being sued in their individual capacity, and they are suing the chief in his capacity as the chief of Canton. All right, so facts. On April 31st, 2002, at approximately 12:45 a.m., Mark Lopilato was sitting in a friend's car in a parking lot outside the Golden China restaurant in Canton, Massachusetts. Earlier that evening, Mark Lopilato had been in a verbal dispute with several individuals, including an individual by the name of Tim Albert. So Tim, the other Canton police officer, is involved in this too. Tim Albert's older brother, Chris Albert, is a childhood friend of defendant Lank. Chris and Tim Albert had been drinking that evening at Centerfield's bar in Canton. And Centerfield's is now known as C.F. McCarthy's, I believe, which is the first bar that they were at before they went to the waterfall. John and Karen was the first bar that they went to. So Centerfield's is now whatever I just said. I can't remember now. That's how funny my brain is. Sometimes it'll like come to me and then it's gone. All right, so defendant Lank was drinking at Centerfield's, C.F. McCarthy's, that evening as well. 13. While sitting in the car, sorry, Mark Lopilato noticed a group of several men leave Centerfield's bar and approach the car. At this time, Mark Lopilato exited the car. He was then attacked by several of the men in the group, including Chris Albert. After this attack, Mark Lopilato called his brother Alfredo Lopilato and informed him that he had been physically assaulted by a group of men. Plaintiff Alfredo Lopilato, this doesn't sound like he pulled the first punch, does it? As Lank testified to. After this attack, Mark Lopolito, or Lopilato, called his brother Alfredo to come and um, see what's up. So plaintiff Alfredo left his girlfriend's house where he had been sleeping and came to the parking lot out of concern for his brother's well being. When Alfredo Lopilato arrived, he noticed Chris Albert, Tim Albert's brother. Alfredo knew Chris Albert and thus approached him to inquire about the earlier dispute. At this time, defendant Lank came from the area in front of Centerfield's bar. He was swaying as he walked. At trial following this incident, Lank would admit that he drank about 4 beers in the 2 hours that he was in Centerfields. Defendant Lank approached the plaintiffs as they approached Chris Albert. He began yelling that he was a police officer. His breath smelled strongly of alcohol. At the time at the trial following the incident, Lank would testify that he activated himself as a police officer at that time. And you heard Alan Jackson refer to that phrase too. He repeated that phraseology, saying, "And you, sir, said that you activated yourself as a police officer," because he was pretty drunk if he's swaying as he's walking out of the bar. So there's no way or reason why he should be activating himself as a police officer. He was not on duty that night. He just decides he's going to. Is that what you do? You activate yourself as a police officer when something's off, when you're off duty and you want to become a police officer? You just, boom, I'm a police officer again. I'm activated. I don't think it works that way. All right, 20 Canton police officers, defendant Lane and defendant Nix, arrived at the scene. Defendant Lank instructed them to handcuff plaintiff Alfredo Lopolito. So, okay. So Lank approached the defendant, or the plaintiff, sorry. So Lank approached the Lopolito brothers as they were approaching Chris. So it was like, everyone's coming together to like combine in this circle. He began yelling that he was a police officer. Lank was. He smelled strongly of alcohol and he testified that he activated himself as police officer at that time. So now other individuals, other Canton police officers are arriving at the scene. Defendant Lank instructed them to handcuff Alfredo. Defendant Nix handcuffed Alfredo Lopolito and placed him in the back of a police cruiser. So now Alfredo is handcuffed, and it's shocking to me, like, that Lank is giving these orders and these other officers are just like, okay, no big deal. Is that how it works? I don't know. I mean, wouldn't you be like, hey dude, you're drunk and you're off duty tonight? What's going on? Which I think eventually did happen, but not originally, because they still handcuffed Alfredo and put him in the back of the cruiser. All right, so while the other officers were placing Alfredo Lopilato in the police cruiser, defendant Lank approached Mark Lopilato, pushed him backwards, and then punched him with a closed fist on the side of the face. Mark Lopilato fell to the ground. Defendant Lank landed on top of him. This is not what Lank testified to at all. He made it, he diminished the seriousness of the offenses by far. Defendant Lank continued to hit Mark Lopilato. Defendant Lank then bit the plaintiff Mark Lopilato on the arm, breaking the skin. Defendant Lane pulled defendant Lank off of Mark Lopilato. He did not ask Lopilato for any identifying information. He simply told him to leave. So what does that tell you? That these individuals are in some kind of physical altercation with a off-duty, very drunk police officer, and this police officer called for backup, And the backup came, and the backup says, you know what? You can just go, even though you were just in a physical altercation with a cop. On what planet can you physically fight a police officer and not go to jail for it? Unless the police officer was in the wrong for something and the other cops knew it, which I think they did. All right, so he did not ask Lopilato for any identifying information, just told him to leave. When Alfredo Lopilato was sitting handcuffed in the back of the cruiser, defendant Lank approached him and spit directly in his face. And that is like one of the most disgusting things you can do. I mean, maybe not the most disgusting, but that's pretty gross. Don't do that to people. That's really rude. Defendant Lank then asked Alfredo who the other kid was. He then said, "Whoever he is, I'm going to make his life miserable." Defendant Lank's speech was slurred and his breath smelled of alcohol. After Defendant Lank spit in Alfredo Lopilato's face, Defendant Lane released him from their handcuffs. Lopilato asked, "Did you see him spit in my face?" Defendant Lane responded, "Just get in your car and leave." So this Officer Lane refused to see or refused to say that he saw Defendant Lank spit in his face. Sergeant Lank. He was an officer at the time, and he spit in Alfredo's face. But the other cop, Lane, said, "Just go home. Just get out of here." That's pretty awful. You just got your face, someone just spit in your face and nothing can happen to them. Like there's no repercussions. That's awful. All right, so 28. Defendant Link drove away after the incident despite his obvious intoxication. The next morning, Saturday, August 31st, 2002, Alfredo Lopilato went to the Canton police station to make a complaint with Internal Affairs on behalf of his brother and himself. He was then sent away and told that he would have to come back on the following Tuesday. So I believe it was a weekend, so he had to come back on the following Tuesday, September 3rd, 2002. Yeah, so he arrived on a Saturday. They said, "Come back next Tuesday if you wanted to make a complaint." Alfredo asked Mark if he would go to the police station on that date because Alfredo would be working. Police reports regarding the incident were not drafted or filed until September 2nd, and this was only after Alfredo Lopilato went to the station on August 31st to complain about the conduct of the defendant officers. So, no police reports were written until after Alfredo shows up at the police station saying, "Hey, I got a complaint about you guys." It's a little suspicious, I think. 31. On the following Tuesday, September 3rd, 2002, Mark Lopilato went to the Canton police station to make a complaint on behalf of himself and his brother. He spoke with a sergeant and described the officer's conduct during the incident. The sergeant told him he would get back to him regarding his complaint. Someone from the department called Alfredo that evening and stated that she would look into the complaint. To this day, neither Mark nor Alfredo Lopilato has heard anything further from anyone in the Canton Police Department regarding the outcome of any investigation into their complaint. Soon thereafter, both Mark and Alfredo Lopilato received a summons in the mail to appear in court on September 25th, and they had each been charged with assault and battery on a police officer. Why weren't they charged that night if they indeed did assault a police officer? Why weren't they charged that night? Why were they told, "Just get in your car and go"? Because they knew they had done something wrong. So this corruption has been building and building for over 20, well over 20 years. We know that one of the one of the biggest corruption cases in history took place in like the turn of the century, I think, in Massachusetts, and that was also done in their courthouse, the same courthouse that Karen Reed's trials in. So it just comes full circle that there has been corruption in that town by law enforcement for a very long time. Maybe it wasn't the turn of the century, but it was a while ago. I can't remember. Maybe it was the 50s, something like that. The 1950s. All right, so on the evening of February 6th, 2003, Mark and Alfredo Lopilato went inside a mobile gas station in Canton. Their other brother, Chris Lopilato, and several other individuals were waiting for them in a vehicle outside. Defendant Lank entered the store and asked Mark Lopilato how he was doing. He replied, "Not so good. You attacked me, and now I am the one that has to go to court." Mark and Alfredo went outside to get in the vehicle. Suddenly, several cruisers appeared. Defendant Lank then ordered Mark Lopilato to get into his cruiser. While in the cruiser, Defendant Lank asked, "Can we talk about this now?" When Mark Lopilato did not reply, Defendant Lank placed him under arrest and instructed another officer to take him to the police station. Wow. Lopilato was booked and held at the police station. He was released at 3 a.m. and arraigned the next morning on the following charges: threatening, disorderly conduct, and intimidation. For what? On October 3rd, 2003, after a 2-day jury trial, how can he be the one threatening and intimidating when the cop literally has all the power and the civilian has none? Like, tell me, how is he doing that? It doesn't make any sense. All right, so on October 3rd, 2003, after a 2-day jury trial in Dedham District Court, Mark and Alfredo Lopilato were found not guilty of all charges arising out of the August 31st, 2022 incident. So these guys had to go to court and fight their way through a trial, which you never know what you're going to get when you get a jury trial. And they had to go through all that. Imagine how stressful that was. And they knew that they were in the right and the cops were in the wrong. All of the charges arising out of the February 2003 incident were dismissed. The assistant district attorney who handled the matters apologized to Mark Lopilato and stated that after the October trial, he realized that defendant Lank was a liar. I believe this is Michael Morrissey because hasn't he been in office for forever? I think oh no, ADA, the assistant district attorney. So I don't know who the assistant district attorney was back then. All right. As a result of the defendant's conduct, Mark Lopilato suffered physical injuries, humiliation, embarrassment, and emotional distress, not to mention all the financial burden to have to go through with a trial. You have to have lawyers represent you. I mean, that's a lot to put on someone. And this cop just goes about living his life thinking, he just still gets to be a cop, which is ridiculous in and of itself. You don't activate yourself when you're intoxicated. As a result of the defendant's conduct, Mark Lopilato suffered physical injuries, humiliation, embarrassment, and emotional distress. Alfredo Lopilato suffered humiliation, embarrassment, emotional distress, and economic losses. So count one, violation of 42 U.S.C. by defendants Lank, Nix, and Lane. The plaintiffs restate and reallege the allegations in paragraph 1 through 8 and incorporate said paragraphs herein as paragraph 39. By the actions described in paragraphs 1 through 38 herein, defendants Lank, Nix, and Lane, acting under color of law, violated plaintiffs' rights to be free from excessive force and unlawful seizures, all in violation of 42 U.S.C. 1983 and their rights under the 4th and 14th Amendments, amendments to the United Constitution. Count 2, violation by defendant Bright. The plaintiffs restate and reallege the allegations in paragraph 1 through 40 and incorporate said paragraphs herein as paragraph 41. By the actions described in paragraphs 1 through 40 herein, defendant Bright has, through his actions and omissions, shown a deliberate indifference to the plaintiff's constitutional rights and caused the plaintiff to suffer a deprivation of their constitutional right to be free from excessive force and unlawful seizures by failing to take advantage of easily available measures to ensure his officers did not engage in constitutional violations, failing to adequately train his officers on the use of force and on the guidelines for proper seizures, failing to adequately train, supervise, discipline officers who he knew were prone to use excessive force and make illegal seizures, tolerating a custom and practice in which officers use excessive force and make improper seizures. Yeah, that's huge. And failing to adequately investigate incidents where he knew officers used excessive force and made improper seizures. So you know that your cops are being excessively forceful and you're still not doing anything about it. You just let them keep going on. That's just it's opening you up to a ton of lawsuits. And not just that, but bad things happening in your town. All right, so count 3 by violation by the town of Canton. The police, or I'm sorry, the plaintiffs restate and reallege the allegations in paragraph 1 through 42 and restate them here. By the actions described in these paragraphs, the defendant, town of Canton, has demonstrated a custom and policy of deliberate indifference to the rights of its citizens by failing to adequately train its officers on the use of force and on the guidelines for proper seizures, failing to adequately train, supervise, discipline officers who are prone to use excessive force and make illegal seizures, tolerating a custom and practice in which officers use excessive force and make improper seizures, and failing to adequately investigate incidents where officers use excessive force and make improper seizures. Count 4, violation of Massachusetts Civil Rights Act by all individual defendants. The plaintiffs restate and reallege the allegations in paragraphs 1 through 44 and incorporate them here. By the actions described in these paragraphs, the defendant violated the plaintiff's civil rights through threats, intimidation, and coercion in violation of MGL C12, whatever, 1I. Wherefore, plaintiffs request that this honorable court award compensatory damages against the defendants jointly and severally, or severely, award punitive damages against defendant police officers, award the costs of this action, including reasonable attorney's fees, and award such other and further relief as this court deems necessary. And that is the end of the the criminal complaint of the Lopilato brothers versus a bunch of people in Canton. Michael Lank, Glenn Nix, Errol Lane. I wonder if all 3 of them are still officers in Canton. We know Chief Bright is no longer the chief. I'm sure that's Helena Rafferty is actually the chief right now in Canton, and people aren't happy about it. She has her own mess of problems. But so there you have it. This gives us a little bit of a background for the Lopilato brothers. I tried to find pictures of them. I could only find one, so I didn't want to put just one and not the other. So sorry you don't have pictures of them. But I do believe that they own a construction company in the area, the Lopilato Construction Company, which I assume only because of the names. I have no idea if it's them or other family members or what, but somebody with the name of Lopilato owns a construction company in Massachusetts. So my little deductive skills, I figured it was somebody from their family. I've never heard that name before. Anyways, that is all I have for you today. I hope you enjoyed that. I hope you have a little bit better understanding now of the close ties between all of these people in Canton. Not only that, but the close ties of the Alberts themselves with all of the law enforcement in the town. Basically, everybody. I mean, it almost feels like mob cop symbiotic relationship thing going on. It's from an outsider. That's what it appears to be, almost. I'm not saying it's a Scorsese film, but I saw a really good one that no, not is it Scorsese? Um, The Departed. I love that movie. I love that movie. The Departed, but I call it The Departed. I love the Boston accent. All right, on that note, I will let you guys go. Thank you so much for watching. Take care. I hope to see you guys in the next one. And let me know, this topic was, I've already talked about it, but it's good to revisit it. It's good to refresh our minds before the Lopilato brothers come to the stand, if they do take the stand. So that'll be interesting. But if you guys have other angles or other parts of this story that you would like me to cover, let me know in the comments below, and I will certainly look into it. If there's anything to cover, I will. So I'm open to suggestions on topics and all of that. So please don't hesitate to let me know what you would like me to cover. All right, I will see you guys later. Thank you so much for watching. Take care and have a good one.
If you've been impacted by a true crime and would like your story told in your own words, or if you or someone you know has been wrongfully convicted or accused of a crime, please write to crimeincourtchannel@gmail.com and tell us your real true crime encounters. Thanks for watching.